Hello, everyone. Today, we are going to talk about art and philosophy. But before we start with our discussion, I want you to get your notebooks and your pen, and in your own words, what do you think is the meaning of art, and what do you think is the meaning of philosophy? You may pause this video and write your answers on your notes, or you may comment down below. Okay, so every substance defined as a formed matter moves according to a fixed path towards its aim. For example, a seed is bound to become a full-grown plant. A cocoon can also look forward to flying high when it morphs into a butterfly. And a baby will eventually turn into a grown man or woman. This telos, according to Aristotle, is intricately linked with function. For a thing to reach its purpose, it also has to fulfill its function. Man, in Aristotle's view of reality, is bound to achieve a life of fulfillment and happiness, or in Greek, the term eudaimonia. All men move toward this final end. However, happiness, the supposed end of man, is linked with his function, which is being rational. One can only be happy when he is rational. This means that, to Aristotle, plants can never be happy because they are not rational, as well as tables and chairs. And man's natural end, or the telos, is connected with this function, which is his rationality. Moreover, the telos and function of a thing are both related to a thing's identity. What do you think makes a table, right? So, well, what makes a table is the fact that it does perform its function, and thereby reaching its telos. If a table does not have a surface on which we can put on our books or our plates and glasses, then it ceases to be a table. It's not to be considered a table, correct? The same goes for the human being. What makes a human being, according to some schools of thought, is his capacity for thinking, his supposed function. Without this function, the human being ceases to be a human being. The telos, the function, and the whatness of a thing are all interconnected. In contemporary life, the connection between the end and the function and the whatness of a thing has become closer and more interlaced, suggesting sometimes that the end is the function or the function is the end, and that may determine what kind of thing a thing is. For example, when one sees a new kitchen appliance in the department store, one tries to know first what function the appliance has. After knowing these functions, then one can claim to know the purpose of the appliance and then begins to realize what appliance one is looking at. I have here a few questions for you to answer again. You get your notes, you get your paper and pen, and try to pause this video and answer these questions. When one speaks of function, one is practically talking about the use of an object whose function is in question. An inquiry on the function of art is an inquiry on what the art is for. Alternatively, the answer to the question, what is this for, is the function of whatever it in the question refers to. Suppose one asks, what is the Rizal Monument for? What's the function of Rizal Monument? Why was it erected in the Rizal Park? Is it for pure sentimental value? Is it for its aesthetic value because it's beautiful, so it was built there? Or does it send a message to those who witness it? Diba? So in this string of questions, the inquirer is hoping to get the function of a piece of an art in Rizal Park, which is the monument. So when it comes to function, different art forms come with distinctive function. So anong function ng isang monument? There is no one-to-one correspondence between an art and its function, actually. Some art forms are more functional than others, diba? Architecture, for example, is an art that is highly functional, just like other applied arts. A building as a work of art is obviously made for a specific reason, correct? The Taj Mahal, a massive mausoleum of white marble built in Agra, was constructed in memory of the favorite wife of the then Emperor Shah Jahan. In the other hand, naman, jewelry making as an art is known by its product. The name of the art in these applied arts is basically denoted by its specific function. In this and other such functional arts, sabi ni Dudley, function is so important that it has usurped the name of the art on the identification of individual works. Other examples are paintings, poems, and statues. The name of the art basically points toward the direction of the product or its function. On the other end of the spectrum, one can only think of a painting and literature as a form of art that have the least to do with purely practical values. For other people, painting and literature, what's the function of those, di ba? Parang wala for them. But when one examines and thinks of a painting or work of literature, such as poem or a novel, one looks at the value of the art in itself, and not because of what it can do and benefit us. Unlike practical arts, where the value of the art in question lies in the practical benefits one gains from it. For example, we gain a pot in pottery making, jewelry in jewelry making, so we gain a house or a building in architecture, example like that. But in painting and literature, one can only look at the value of the product of art in and for itself. A poem, for example, is beautiful, regardless of its possible ramifications in the society. For example, do you still remember Joyce Kilmer's poem entitled Trees? I think that I shall never see a poem as lovely as a tree. This poem has maintained its popularity through the years, regardless of its application or practical benefit. This definitely is not to say that paintings and literary works cannot have any function, though. The two masterpieces of our national hero, Dr. Jose P. Rizal, the Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, served as a catechism for Filipino revolutionaries to gather strength in rejecting the oppressive forces of the Spaniards in the Philippines during the 19th century. The novels accrued value and, as a consequence, function. This function, as it turns out, may be over and beyond its literary work. According to Durley, they are functional insofar as they are designed to accomplish some definite end. In the case of Rizal's novels, they spelled out a country's independence. They continue to be treasured even 100 years after their supposed functions, as up until now we are still studying Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo. Roughly and broadly, the functions of art are classified into three: the personal, social, and physical functions. Let's try to define each of these. Okay, let's try to understand these. First is the personal function of art. These are varied and highly subjective. This means that its functions depend on the person or the artist who created the art. An artist may create an art out of the need for self-expression. This is the case for an artist who needs to communicate an idea to his audience. It can also be mere entertainment for his intended audience, or often the artist may not even intend to mean anything with his work. An art may also be therapeutic. In some orphanages and home for abandoned elders, art is used by residents to help them process their emotions or while away their time. Recently, the use of adult coloring books in order to distress has been apparent, now with a lot of designs being sold in bookstores nationwide. All of these examples fall under the personal functions of art. Art is considered to have a social function naman if and when it addresses a particular collective interest as opposed to a personal interest. Again, if it addresses a collective interest. That's why it's called social functions of art and not just merely personal interest. For example, political art. They perform a social function. Art may convey message of protest, contestation, or whatever message that the artist intends to carry with his work. Often, art can also depict social conditions. For example, here in our photo at the bottom, photography as an art form delivers this kind of function by taking photos of subjects in condition that people do not normally take a look at or give attention to. Sample pictures of poverty may carry emotions and that may solicit action or awareness from their audience. Moreover, performance art like plays or satires can also rouse emotions and rally people toward a particular end. In this and more, the social function of art is apparent. Alright. Next is the physical function of art. The physical function of art are the easiest to spot and understand. The physical functions of art can be found in artworks that are crafted in order to serve some physical purpose. Our example here, Japanese rakugo, has a physical function of art because it serves a function in tea ceremony. Architecture, jewelry making, and even interior designs are also forms of art that have physical function. For other functions of art, music as an art is also interesting to talk about in relation to function. Music in its original form was principally functional because it was used for dance and religion. Unlike today, when one can just listen to music for the sake of music's sake, the ancient world saw music only as an instrument to facilitate worship and invocation to gods. Music was also essential to dance because music assures synchronicity among dancers. Moreover, music also guarantees that marches in the case of warriors were simultaneous. Today, music has expanded its function and coverage because music is listened to and made by people for reasons that were foreign to the early civilizations. There is now a lot of music that has no connection whatsoever to dance or religion. Serenade is one example. People compose hymns of love to express feelings and emotions. Music is also used as a wonderful accompaniment to stage plays and motion pictures. Interestingly, a piece of music can mean a multitude of meanings to different people, a proof that, as an art, music has gone a long way. Sculpture, on the other hand, is another functional art form that has long existed for various purposes. Just like music, from the early days of humanity, sculptures have been made by man most particularly for religion. People erect statues for the divine, and in the Roman Catholic world, the employment of sculptures for religious purposes has remained vital, relevant, and symbolic up until today. Sculptures were also made in order to commemorate history. In our first example, Jose Rizal's monument in the Rizal Park, and another is Andres Bonifacio's monument in Caloocan, are common examples. In the University of the Philippines, the Statue of Oblation by Guillermo E. Tolentino has remained a pillar of the university and constant reminder of the need to offer oneself up selflessly for the country. Coins are also manifestation of sculpting's function. Every coin in the Philippines features a relief of a famous hero or personality, right? And recently, the Central Bank of the Philippines produced special commemorative coins for certain personalities like Pope Francis and Horacio de la Costa. Another art form that readily lends itself to multiple functions is, of course, architecture. In fact, architecture might be the most prominent functional art form. Buildings are huge, expensive, and are not easily constructed and replaced. Unlike other forms of art like pots, furniture, poetry, or even paintings, buildings take so much time to erect and destroy. A lot of investment is put into making megastructures like the pyramids of Giza, the Acropolis, or the great cathedrals of the Middle Ages. One cannot simply dismiss taking into consideration the function of a building before construction. It is also in architecture where one can find the intimate connection of function and form. In planning out an architectural structure, one has to seriously consider the natural conditions like topography and climate of the place of erection, and the social conditions such as the purpose of the building itself. In the Philippines, climate is a huge factor in building a house. Spanish colonial houses during those times were designed to allow air to circulate inside the house, hence the large windows. During those times, large windows were staples then, very common. Capiz shells were also utilized to allow for light to enter the house even if the windows were closed. Moreover, social conditions such as purpose play a huge role in architecture. To Christians, a church is primarily a place of worship and assembly. Regular ceremonies where members of the church are expected to come regularly are held inside the church. A huge, spacious church, therefore, is necessitated by this condition. Indeed, whenever art serves a particular function, the form has to be determined by the function. Here's another question. Does art always have to be functional? What do you think? While it has been shown that most arts are functional, still, there are some which are not. The value of a work of art does not depend on function but on the work itself. The plays of Aeschylus and the poetry of Robert Frost and Edgar Allan Poe are still counted as examples of great works of art despite their not having a known function. In those whose functions are ascertained, however, it is a different story. A functional object cannot be claimed to be beautiful unless it can perform its functions efficiently. Consider a house that cannot even protect its residents from the nasty weather outside, or this spoon that spills the food on it. Adequate performance of function partly determines the beauty of a design in these functional art forms. Despite this, efficiency cannot be mistaken as beauty. While it certainly determines beauty in some works of art, an efficient functional object is not necessarily beautiful. Art demands so much more than mere efficiency. What then really comprises beauty and art? What makes something truly beautiful? What really makes a work of art? And what really is art? The next section attempts to provide different perspectives on the nature of art. Here is a video by Ted Ed on Plato's Allegory of the Cave. We cannot show the whole video here due to copyright reasons, but here is the link if you want to watch the whole video.
Years ago, one of history's most famous thinkers said life is like being chained up in a cave, forced to watch shadows flitting across a stone wall. Pretty cheery, right? That's actually what Plato suggested in his Allegory of the Cave, found in Book 7 of the Republic, in which the Greek philosopher envisioned the ideal society by examining concepts like justice, truth, and beauty. In the allegory, a group of prisoners have been confined in a cavern since birth, with no knowledge of the outside world. They are chained facing a wall, unable to turn their heads, while
Plato, in his masterpiece The Republic, particularly paints a picture of artists as imitators, and art as mere imitation. In his description of the ideal republic, Plato advises against the inclusion of art as a subject in the curriculum, and the banning of artists in the republic. In Plato's metaphysics or view of reality, the things in this world are only copies of the original, the eternal, and the true identities that can only be found in the world of forms. Human beings endeavor to reach the forms all throughout this life, starting with formal education in school. From looking at shadows in the cave, men slowly crawl outside to behold the real entities in the world. For example, the chair that one sits on is not a real chair. It is an imperfect copy of a perfect chair in the world of forms. Much is true for beauty in this world. When one ascribes beauty to another person, he refers to an imperfect beauty that participates only in the form of beauty in the world of forms. Plato was convinced that artists merely reinforce the beliefs in copies and discourages men to reach for the real entities in the world of forms. Plato was deeply suspicious of art and artists for two reasons. First, they appeal to the emotion rather than to the rational faculty of men, and they imitate rather than lead one to reality. Poetry and painting, the art forms that Plato was particularly concerned with, do not have any place in the ideal state that Socrates, in Plato's dialogue, envisions. First, Plato is critical of the effects of art, specifically poetry, to the people of the ideal state. Poetry rouses emotions and feelings, and thus clouds the rationality of people. Poetry has a capacity to sway minds without taking into consideration the use of proper reason. As such, it leads one further away from the cultivation of the intellect that Plato campaigned for. Likewise, Socrates is worried that art objects represent only the things in this world, copies of reality. As such, in the dialogue, Socrates claimed that art is just an imitation of an imitation. A painting is just an imitation of nature, which is also just an imitation of reality in the world of forms. The arts are then to be banished alongside the practitioners or the artists, so that the attitudes and actions of the members of the republic will not be corrupted by the influence of the arts. For Plato, art is dangerous because it provides a petty replacement for the real entities that can only be attained through reason. Aristotle, Plato's most important student in philosophy, agreed with his teacher that art is a form of imitation. However, in contrast to the disgust that his master holds for art, Aristotle considered art as an aid to philosophy in revealing truth. The kind of imitation that art does is not antithetical to the reaching of fundamental truths in the world. Talking about tragedies, for example, Aristotle in the Poetics claimed that poetry is a literary representation in general. Akin to other art forms, poetry only admits of an attempt to represent what things might be. For Aristotle, all kinds of art, including poetry, music, dance, painting, and sculpture, do not aim to represent reality as it is. What art endeavors to do is provide a vision of what might be or the myriad possibilities in reality. Unlike Plato, who thought that art is an imitation of another imitation, Aristotle conceives of art as representing possible versions of reality. In Aristotelian worldview, art serves two particular purposes. First, art allows for the experience of pleasure. Experiences that are otherwise repugnant can become entertaining in art. For example, a horrible experience can be made an object of humor in comedy. Secondly, art also has an ability to be instructive and teach its audience things about life. Thus, it is cognitive as well. Greek plays are usually of this nature. In the third critic that Immanuel Kant wrote, the Critic of Judgment, Kant considered the judgment of beauty, the cornerstone of art, as something that can be universal despite its subjectivity. Kant mentioned that judgment of beauty, and therefore art, is innately autonomous from specific interests. It is a form of art that is adjudged by one who perceives art to be beautiful or more so sublime. Therefore, even aesthetic judgment for Kant is cognitive activity. Kant recognized that judgment of beauty is subjective. However, Kant advanced the proposition that even subjective judgments are based on some universal criterion for the said judgment. In the process, Kant responded to the age-old question of how and in what sense can a judgment of beauty, which ordinarily is considered to be subjective, be considered objective or universal. How is this so? For Kant, when one judges a particular painting as beautiful, one in effect is saying that the said painting has induced a particular feeling of satisfaction from him that he expects the painting to rouse the same feeling from anyone. There is something in the work of art that makes it capable of inciting the same feeling of pleasure and satisfaction from any perceiver, regardless of his condition. For Kant, every human being, after perception and a free play of his faculties, should recognize the beauty that is inherent in a work of art. This is the kind of universality that a judgment of beauty is assumed by Kant to have. So, when the same person says that something is beautiful, he does not just believe that the thing is beautiful for him, but, in a sense, expect that the same thing should put everyone in awe. The author of War and Peace and Anna Karenina, Leo Tolstoy, provided another perspective on what art is. In his book, What is Art?, Tolstoy defended the production of the sometimes truly extravagant art like operas, despite extreme poverty in the world. For him, art plays a huge role in communication to its audience emotions that the artist previously experienced. Art then serves as a language, the communication device that articulates feelings and emotions that are otherwise unavailable to the audience. In the same way that language communicates information to other people, art communicates emotions. In listening to music, in watching an opera, in reading poems, the audience is at the receiving end of the artist communicating his feelings and emotions. Tolstoy is fighting for the social dimension of art. As a purveyor of man's innermost feelings and thoughts, art is given a unique opportunity to serve as a mechanism for social unity. Art is central to man's existence because it makes accessible feelings and emotions of people from the past and present from one continent to another. In making these possibly latent feelings and emotions accessible to everyone and anyone in varied time and location, art serves as a mechanism of cohesion for everyone. Thus, even at present, one can commune with the early Cambodians at their struggles by visiting the Angkor Wat, or can definitely feel for the early royalties of different Korean dynasties by watching Korean dramas. Art is what allows for these possibilities. So to conclude this presentation, I want you to answer these last two questions. It's up to you if you want to type this or write them using pen and paper, but you pass them to me through Messenger or through our email. That's it all for today in Art and Philosophy.